Hello and good evening. So to continue on with my Piles of Shame and Skirmish games theme, today we are going to build some Octarius terrain, and I'll show you some of the issues I've been having, and hopefully a good way to overcome them. So the first order of business was to put together the main buildings. Now, as you can see in the background, I've already put together a couple of them, and let me just show you one of the problems that pretty much everyone that puts this terrain together is having. These glue points are very unstable. So what I've done is I've put a little bit of sprue under there to strengthen it up a little bit. And it so far is working pretty well. I've also, I'd like to point out that on the little section there where there is no wall, you want to put some glue on the top, not just on the sides. So just to show you where I'm going with this, I get out my trusty Gorilla Glue, which at this point was darn near stuck together. And I put a little bit of glue on the track here. And of course, I fumble my arm into the camera like an idiot, but we'll keep going. Now, as you can see on that little section there, I put a little bit of glue on the top instead of on the side because obviously the plate rests on the top. Now, it doesn't require a lot of glue. Thankfully, the plastic is held together fairly well, and I have to give this to Games Workshop. Most of the time, their terrain is pretty on point. For this particular set, you just kind of pop it in there, you make sure everything's flush, and you're good to go. So at that point, you're pretty much ready to rock and roll, tabletop ready. So after that, I grabbed the next piece of terrain, which is the junk piles and the Ramshackle Barricades here. And I went ahead and sped this up because obviously you don't want to see me, clipping a bunch of stuff off of sprues all afternoon, all evening, whatever time it is where you are. But these are quite obviously fairly simple. You just kind of clip them off the sprue, you stand them up, or in the case of the junk piles, you flop them onto the table, good to go. The detail on these are phenomenal. And from what I understand, from what I was told in one of my previous comments, a lot of this stuff is from Speed Freaks, which unfortunately I never got to get into. So after you do the walls, the piles also are fairly simple. Clip them off, got all little details there, and you flop them on the table and you're done. All of these are very detailed. I absolutely love the junk piles, and I'm probably going to end up using them for not just Kill Team, but I'm fairly certain I'm going to use them for Stargrave and whatever else I decide to sci-fi. They sit on the table pretty well for the walls. They're pretty sturdy. And once you get those all off, then move on to the next piece, which is the small platforms. Now, these little platforms, and of course the bridges there, are a pain in the butt to put together. Once you get everything snipped off, you'll see what I mean. So each of the little legs has that little glue point there that sticks to two tiny pieces of plastic. So what I did is I actually ended up putting a piece of sprue between the two legs and a little bit on the top there to solidify everything and put it together, make it a little more stable. And because this is orc terrain, pretty much you just paint it as like a metal beam and you're good to go. And as you can see, it's fairly stable after that. Now moving on to the bigger piece here, the tanks. I had run out of Gorilla Glue at this point. And let me tell you, I probably should have just gone and got more Gorilla Glue. But so the bottom part there, if you see the pipe that connects to the oil derrick, it's not a very strong glue point either. So I doubt Games Workshop is going to see my video, but GW, if you can, if you see the video, I think you need to work on the glue points a little bit better on some of this terrain, because I love the ramshackle nature of the orc terrain, but it is a pain to keep together. Now, in this video, or this part of the video, what I did was I put the glue on there, I shuffled it to the side, and I set it there to dry. Now, obviously, another thing I had going for me, unfortunately, is the fact that I didn't have any Gorilla Glue. So once again, I was using just a regular generic super glue gel. Oh, by the way, Gorilla Glue gel. All right, I'm not sponsored by Gorilla Glue, but if you need something to stick, use the gel. So as you can see here, I began struggling a little bit with this piece. Not only with the glue, but with the fact that I could not get my fingers on the piece, nor could I stab it with the X-Acto knife. So after a little bit of creative finagling here, I just finally just picked it up as best I could, put a couple of dabs of super glue on there, and gave it the old college try again. Eventually, I did get it on there, and I went back as well and put a little bit of plastic cement around the edges on some of this stuff, because that plastic cement will actually melt the plastic and create a bit of a stronger bond between the pieces. If you're paying attention there, you can see that the leg kind of popped off again, even though the super glue had been on there for quite some time. So I had to go back in and reposition that real quickly. And once again, putting the beam there, the sprue piece, right between the two. Now, there's enough leftover sprue on these that you'll have plenty of spare sprue to do this with. And let me tell you, it comes in handy, and you're going to need to do it, because these things do not stay together very well. So finally, having gotten both of those together, I decided to cut my losses, because that was awful. Now, once I did that, I went back and revisited the whole glue situation. And even though I swear by Gorilla Glue, it still was a little bit difficult. But for the small things like the little wheels here, or not wheels, but the handles, I just put a little dab on there and then stick the dowel into the hole. Simple enough. Now, the oil derrick piece is very, very fiddly. So instead of trying to do all of the small pieces afterward, I went back and I put the pipe in, I put all of the handles in, and I did all of that before I started trying to stick it all together. So once that was done, I turned around and I decided that I just needed to do something different here. So I took some green stuff. Again, I'm not sponsored. I just happen to have Army Painter green stuff. It works just fine, just as well as any other anything else you would use, like milliput or whatnot. If you want to know more about green stuff, Brent from Goobertown Hobbies actually has a very, very good video on not just how to use it, but the chemistry behind it. And I'll leave a link here for you to down in the comments for you to go to. When working with green stuff, it makes it a lot easier if your fingers and the surface are wet. That way it doesn't stick as bad as you're trying to mix everything up. And once you give everything a good mix and twirl here, and of course I always make sure to put my green stuff away once I'm done, lest it dry out all that much faster. But as you can see, I'm just kind of twisting, pulling, mixing as best I can, keeping the surface wet. And then once that's done, you can apply it to the piece. Alright, got myself a nice ball of it there. And what I did here is I revisited the Gorilla Glue concept, but this time I put the glue on the bottom instead of putting it on the little piece. And then I took the pipe that connects to the derrick itself, and I sort of put it there on hand, by hand, and stuck it together, and then put the green stuff in the gap between the tanks and the pipes themselves. Now this is, of course, it does take a little bit of finagling as you're doing it, but once you get the green stuff in there, it actually makes things a lot simpler, and it makes it a lot easier to do. So I just shoved as much as I could in there, carved off the excess, and took the excess and stuck it over in the corner there to just to kind of solidify things a little better and make it stick easier. So once and of course, because of the fact that this is going to be on the bottom of the piece, nobody's going to see it. I didn't bother smoothing it out or making it look all pretty, because why would you need to do that? And once everything is together, I set it on its side to start to dry. And then I realized it was getting pushed around. So I tried something different. I put the pipes and the tanks on the little platforms. And once that was cured, then I began the painful process of trying to tinker this stuff together. And let me tell you, wow, it is this is probably one of the more fiddly pieces that I've ever tried to assemble. Now, as you can see, the platform kind of goes over top of the derrick itself, and then you've got a small ladder. Now, I put the ladder on backwards here, but I went back and fixed it later. The big part of this is just kind of getting it together, letting the glue dry as best you can, and then I went back around, and on a couple of different pieces I took some plastic cement, and once again, like I did with the other pieces, I just brushed a little bit on the sides, around the bottom, just to try and make the pieces hold just a little bit better. I didn't use a whole lot here, just enough to kind of keep it together as it was drying. And that seemed to do the trick, because it's holding together quite nicely. Now, as you can see here, once I've got everything back together, the green stuff on the bottom, it's not pretty, but it is solid, and it will keep that whole piece together. It's everything is pretty solid together, and you can see there I put a couple more pieces of sprue on to make things a little more sturdy. And did the drop test, working pretty well. So here is a photo of the process. There, obviously, it's not all that difficult of a process, but putting the sprue pieces together. Well, that's it for this week's video. I hope you enjoyed and found something that can help. Like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.